Over the last few years, we've gotten a lot of questions about gypsum. So today we want to discuss what exactly is gypsum, what can it do for you on your farm, and should you be using it in your operation?
Well, it certainly makes sense to look at gypsum when you think of what it actually is. It's calcium sulfate. And when you look at the nutrients that our crops need, yeah, the NPK gets a lot of attention, and rightly so. But the next biggest nutrients we need are calcium and sulfur. And here you go. In gypsum, you've got both of those nutrients. And when I look at farms across the country, it seems like almost everybody is short in one of the two, if not both of them. So calcium sulfate obviously is a product many consider.
Okay, what will gypsum do though exactly out in your soil? Some people think, oh, it's going to dramatically change my soil pH. Well, no. Gypsum is really not a soil pH changing product. If you need to raise your pH, if you've got a low pH, we want you to lime. That's calcium carbonate. Okay, if you've got a high pH soil, you might consider using elemental sulfur, improving your drainage, doing some other things. Gypsum could help in a high pH situation, but it's not the product that's actually going to lower your high pH soil and get that back down to a 7. So those are probably the biggest misconceptions there are about gypsum out there. So let's talk about what gypsum actually can do for your soil. The first thing I look at is that calcium piece. As Darren said, we need lots of calcium. Calcium may be the most important nutrient for your soil, not necessarily for the crop, but for your soil. It really helps to build your soil, and here's how it does this. Calcium is a very big molecule, and if you have a bunch of these big molecules out there, then it gives more pore space in your soil, gives roots more room to grow, gives water more room to move through, and it's also good for a lot of your soil life, the worms and the beneficial bacteria and fungi. Calcium's a tremendously important thing. Typically in a base saturation percentage, we're looking for 65 to 80% to be calcium. That's a very high number. It's number one on our list on the base saturation test. So we need lots of it out there, and if you don't have enough calcium, adding gypsum is one of the ways you can get that extra calcium.
Well, the other thing that we see with calcium is people look at soil tests and say, wow, I have lots of parts per million of calcium. My soil test says I'm very high in calcium, but some of that calcium is just not coming available for your crop. And available calcium is really the key here. So don't just look at your soil test and say, wow, I've got lots of calcium out there. I can't possibly need any more. You may need some calcium, and you really need to look at plant tissue analysis and other things about how your crop is growing to determine what's going on. Because what we see across the country, especially in high pH soils where we've got high calcium, we see a lot of that calcium being tied up and not really available and getting into our crop as our crop needs it, and our crop can suffer if we don't have that.
I want to give you two main reasons why you've got to have plenty of sulfur in your soil. Number one, obviously your crop needs it, and your crop probably needs it in a lot higher dosage than you've ever realized. You used to get lots of free sulfur out of the air from air pollution. Unfortunately, we now have clean air in the country. So because of this clean air, we're not getting all that free fertilizer. But hey, there's the other side of it too. Let's keep in mind that there's a lot less manure spread on a lot of fields. I mean, growing up, everybody had livestock. Well, today, livestock is a lot more concentrated to fewer individuals. It's a lot more special.
It's like everything else. Things have gotten specialized where if you want to be great at livestock production, you're probably specializing in that. If you want to be great at crop production, you're probably specializing in that. It's very uncommon to see guys who are great at both aspects in farming.
The other thing is, for a lot of fertilizers 20, 30 years ago, we used to find a little bit of sulfur in there. Even the MAP we used to buy, mainly phosphorus, 1050O or 1152O, that used to have up to 6% sulfur in there. So we were adding sulfur all the time. Well, we just don't have that. We don't have as much sulfur in our fertilizers, as much sulfur in our crop protection products, as much sulfur coming from the air. We're not putting manure on as much. So there are a lot of reasons why we're not getting so much sulfur. So you need it as a nutrient. The other reason why you may need it is to lower some of the either bad or excessive things that are in your soil. So if you want to lower excess magnesium, if you want to lower excess sodium, get more sulfur out there. That sulfate combined with the magnesium or combined with the sodium to form a salt. Once they convert to salts, now they're leachable, and now they can flush through your system, through your soil, as long as you have good drainage.
All right, there was the key. You have to have good drainage to get things to flush out. So many times when we've got a problem area, and whether you refuse to do drainage or you just can't get approval in that certain spot of the field, Guys will look for the easy fix. What can I do? Can I do some deep tillage and put some gypsum over the top? Hey, those two things can help, but they're really band-aids. You really do need that drainage in order to get it going. The other thing that I see with calcium sulfate or gypsum, when applied on the soil surface and just left on the soil surface to work down through the soil, we do see better infiltration of water.
There are many great benefits to gypsum. We just encourage you, if you've never used some gypsum before, start on your farm, at least on a few acres. But look first at your soil test. You've got to understand what gypsum will do and what it will not do. Again, it's not the pH changer, but what it is it allows you to build up your soil's calcium levels, to build up your soil's sulfur levels, and there are many great benefits of doing those things.
Well, one thing that gypsum can't do is weed control, and you may need that if you have our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop this week's weed later in the show.